5 Live Formula One.
Oh, it's been a fair while, but Formula One is back. 2 race cancellations mean we haven't had a race weekend in about 5 weeks. So there could be a fair bit of rust to shake off, and that's just for my commentary. But it's good to be back. We welcome you to what is now round 4 on the calendar here in Miami. It's Harry Benjamin coming to you from the Miami Dolphins NFL Stadium. We're sat in the sort of gully in between the back of the garages and some of the hospitality area. Nigel Mansell has just walked by, the music's blaring, and I find my 2 esteemed colleagues, Jenny Gow and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson alongside me to preview what's to come this weekend. I don't know, Jenny, does it feel almost like it's the start of the season again? We've had 3 races, almost like pre-season testing. We've tweaked a few things and now we're ready to roll.
Absolutely. And the end between the last season and this was so short that actually this was the proper break that I think everyone needed, apart from the fact that the teams have been working flat out. So there are some people in this paddock who were nicely relaxed, they're tan, they're looking great. There are other people who have been working round the clock to make improvements, find better cars, find some answers to questions. So it's a real tale of 2 halves.
It certainly is. I mean, it was quite nice to get some time off, Andrew, but I know a lot of people have still been working hard, and it's including Andrew Benson, of course. But we should say, obviously, it's as a result of the conflict in the Middle East. So we had Bahrain and Saudi Arabia both cancelled. That's why we had the gap. And there is still a little bit of uncertainty as to, well, how long is this season going to be? Because we have races coming up at the end of the year in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. But closer than that, we've got Azerbaijan on the way. I know there's questions over that. So where do you think this is going to go? And when does Formula One have to make a bit of a call here?
Well, as to where it's going to go, I think you have to ask Donald Trump that question.
Well, fair point.
And I think Formula One at the moment is just playing a waiting game. Yeah. Obviously, if it gets to like end of July and the war's still going on, then Baku looks very shaky for obvious reasons. It borders Iran. And then if it goes on longer than that, then you've got to ask questions about Qatar and Abu Dhabi. But we're a long way from that point at the moment.
And I think they have time to have contingency plans. They didn't have contingency allowance when it all kicked off in Australia. Now they have time to put contingency into place in case they need it, and I think that's an important thing to remember.
Well, there'll only be a contingency plan if they can find a race that pays them money. The problem is all the races that you can find to pay them money are in the Middle East, and the Middle East is where you can't hold races while there's a war going on. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 situation on that front. Yeah. We just have to wait and see. It's as simple as that. That's what Formula One's doing. I'm sure conversations are happening in the background about what if, but they're not making any decisions at the moment.
Benson, you know regulations very well. Is there some form of regulation with the championship of how many rounds have to take place for it to be ruled as an official championship, or is that by the by?
I haven't looked at
Off the top of your head, Benny,
that rule in the past, but we're nowhere near that, Jenny, are we? It was a 24 race calendar.
It used to be 16 back in the day, didn't it?
Those were dreamy.
It's now 22. If they lost another couple of races, it would still be 19, 20. So that's longer than the vast majority of seasons in Formula One history. So I'd have to go back and check the sporting regulations, Jenny, but I don't think there's any real risk of that.
Lovely, nicely dodged, Benson. Look, let's leave that because we'll have to just wait and see on that front. But Jen, we've had this break. Lots of teams have still been able to work hard. When we left things in Japan, Mercedes very much out in front. Kimi Antonelli winning and taking the championship lead. George Russell demoted down to second. But with everybody able to work on their cars in this gap, who do you think's benefited most from this break? Are Mercedes now going to be sort of looking behind them a little bit more? Can the likes of Ferrari or McLaren make some big leap forwards?
An obvious thing to say in answer to that was everyone's had the same length of time. They can use the break as they see fit. So who had the best break? We don't know because we haven't seen any cars on track. We don't know what they've come up with in that break. The vendors are already in place. So I'm really excited about this weekend, not only because it's Miami and it's fabulous and it's a sprint weekend and the sun is shining for now, but also we will get a real gauge of who has taken the bull by the horns and who is slipping away a bit. I think every team you speak to will say, oh yeah, we've found this, that and the other. But it's important to realise they have been analysing data for 5 weeks. And F1 teams are very good at data analysts and analysing them. And And I'm excited to see what they've come up with.
The most interesting one is McLaren, Harry, I think. They're talking about having a completely new car over the space of the next 2 races in Miami and Montreal. And their record with upgrades is almost 100% over the last 2 or 3 years. So, and let's not forget, Oscar Piastri could have won the Japanese Grand Prix had the safety car not happened when it did. Whether maybe George Russell would have passed him, we don't know. But he was leading that race. Yeah, he was certainly in the fight. And so it wouldn't take much for that McLaren to become a genuine threat to Mercedes. It's got the Mercedes engine in it, of course. So I think they're the ones that most people on an objective level will be having their eyes closest on this weekend.
Was it 2023 when they were at the back and then they just had that upgrade? Well, they had one upgrade that suddenly flipped them forwards, then Austria, another one, and it suddenly went, they were suddenly back in the fight.
Austria was the big one, and then there was another one in Singapore that year. But then the key one was this race in 24, when Norris and Piastri started the year. The car wasn't that competitive. They got here, Norris won his maiden Grand Prix victory, and then from there they were basically at the front challenging Verstappen from then on and haven't looked back until the start of this season. So can they keep up their big sort of upgrade record is the big question.
And that's interesting because up and down the field, I think a lot of teams are bringing upgrades. I was speaking to some of the guys from Racing Bulls. Obviously, they're more in the midfield, but they had an upgrade planned for, I think it was Bahrain, which they're bringing up to this weekend. And then they had another upgrade planned for next summer in Canada. So they're going to have back-to-back big upgrades. So we could see some quite big leaps forward. And that could really affect the mind games, the competitiveness between the likes of George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, where it's been a bit of a two-horse race so far.
I think it's also worth pointing out that they've extended the first practice session to an hour and a half because they're very aware. They've tweaked regulations, they've had all these upgrades and a chance to look at the car and how it's performing. So they want to give the drivers a chance to give them a spin out before they're suddenly thrown into qualifying for the sprint race. So the drivers are all universally quite relieved. But it's interesting that Mercedes, from what I've understood so far, have not bought a big upgrade this weekend to Miami, and they're one of the only teams not to have bought an upgrade here that's significant. And I wonder, is that because they're sure enough in themselves? Exactly, because they seem to be. But speaking to the drivers like Charles Leclerc, Ferrari, he was saying, Ferrari haven't gone away yet. They haven't, Mercedes can still be caught. And of course he's going to say that, but I do believe him. And there's all sorts of tweaks that the teams can do throughout the year to give themselves a bit of a boost.
Well, Ferrari's an interesting question because their record on upgrades, I should say, is the exact opposite of McLaren's. They've tended to fall back during seasons. And they've kept one trend going this year, which is when a regulation set changes, they often make a competitive step forward. Like they did in 2022, for example, when the last big regulation change happened. But then, if you remember that year, they just went backwards and backwards through the rest of the year. So there will be eyes on them too, but the pressure on them is very different from McLaren. Can they keep it up?
So where does that leave us then, Jen, coming into Miami with this Mercedes intra-team battle that we've got going on? Because I think maybe I'm speaking for myself, but there's a presumption around George Russell would be the clear dominant force. But Kimi Antonelli has come alive. He leads the championship, the youngest ever driver to do so. That's surely got to ruffle the feathers of Russell.
Harry, I'll just cast your mind back to Austin last year at the point in the podcast where you said George Russell, was it champion in waiting? I believe we argued the toss at that point.
You've got a selective memory, Gal, I think.
I definitely have. But I think the car is good, and both drivers can be very good at different times. They have different ways of doing it. And yes, George Russell has years of experience in this game, and Antonelli is the young pretender. But look how Kimi is getting into George's head. George is making mistakes. He's not had the best of luck, I get that. But I just wonder if there's more to Kimi challenging this year, and I think psychologically that could be key. I know you don't genuinely believe me.
I'm going to argue with you in a second.
Shoot me down, Benny.
What mistakes?
Well, he's been unlucky with the timing of the safety car.
Yes, but that's not a mistake. And I think the thing about Russell is that he's had some bad luck, basically. technical problem in qualifying in China. He probably would have been on pole there. If he'd been on pole in China, he probably would have won the race because he'd have been the lead Mercedes driver rather than Antonelli winning it. Then in Japan, there's a bit of a debate about who would have won the race even if the safety car hadn't happened. But basically, the safety car handed the race on a plate to Antonelli.
But he was on the back foot already because of Saturday, and what happened on Saturday was apparently a mistake that he made. So there have been things that haven't gone his way, but there have also been some faults along the way as well.
But I wouldn't call them like big mistakes that he was making. It's more. I think, if anything, the championship fight is more to do with circumstance at the moment, and also one of the interesting aspects of it is that Antonelli is actually the one who's made 3 bad starts in a row. He's been able to recover from that because of the pace of the Mercedes, particularly. While Mercedes have a competitive advantage, that's going to keep happening. But if the other teams get in the mix, if McLaren move forward, for example, it's going to be harder to recover from any mistakes. And that's the big question. Can he? So in terms of ironing out issues, Antonelli has to look at those starts. He was running 6th in the opening laps in Japan. Got very fortunate with the timing of the safety car. Mercedes were arguing that maybe he would have won the race anyway there because his pace was so good, but that's only if he'd been able to carry on at that speed on those tyres, and whether his pace would have continued. So lots of unknowns there. I think the deliciousness of the championship fight at the moment is it's only just starting. If in a way the unexpected driver is at the front, and the wrong driver in a way is at the front in terms of the competitive balance, in terms of pure speed over 3 races. But it's only 3 races, and there's a really interesting dynamic developing.
Shall we hear from George? Go on then. He caught up with Jen in the pen.
I think we're a bit surprised some people have brought their upgrades to Miami. I think that was probably more they were meant to have brought it to Bahrain or Saudi. We expected a lot of teams to be bringing their upgrades to Montreal. We'll have sort of a slightly bigger upgrade, we hope, in Canada, because obviously there's still 2 weeks after Miami before Canada. So, let's see. Hopefully they haven't caught up too much.
Psychologically, how did you go into this break? Because obviously the results before didn't go exactly your way. There was a bit of bad luck involved. So did you have to kind of work on how you deal with that and how you're dealing with coming back in? Or what was the thought process through that break?
I've got to be honest, it didn't really impact me too much because it was something that was outside of my control, what happened in the last race. And watching the London Marathon gave me a bit of perspective of what an F1 season has in common with a marathon, which is it's such a long distance. And we're now 3 races down. It made me think the guy 3 miles into the race who's at the front, either leading or a few seconds behind or a few seconds ahead, isn't necessarily thinking about the finish line 3 miles in to the marathon. And that's the position we're in. We're 3 races into a 22, maybe 24 race season. It was a very unfortunate race in Japan, but that's a championship, and that's, every race can't be perfect. We go again this weekend and ready to fight.
So George speaking there, and you caught up with him at the Silverstone a few weeks ago. So one of the other things, actually, George has been maybe not unsurprisingly, quite positive about the regulation change from the start of the year. We've talked about it a lot, the huge overhaul, and Jen's already mentioned it. There's been a few tweaks coming into this weekend based off of feedback from the drivers, the teams, and all of us watching. Andrew, in the simplest way possible, can you lay out what the main changes are that we need to know?
I'll lay out what they're meant to do.
Okay, let's
do that. So the drivers had 2 main requests. One was to return qualifying to more flat out, because one of the issues with this sort of 50-50 split between the internal combustion and electrical energy in the engines and the size of the battery has been that the cars are energy starved, and there's lots of energy management going on, even in qualifying. The drivers wanted that to be reduced as much as possible, and to reduce the possibility of massive speed differentials in the race, where one driver's deploying their full 350 kilowatts, which is 470 horsepower in normal power speak. So it's essentially a 500 horsepower difference when when you're deploying energy and when you're not deploying energy. So you can imagine the potential speed differentials there. So they've made a few tweaks to the technicalities of the regulations to reduce those possibilities. They are what Max Verstappen described today as a tickle in the right direction.
I'm sorry, a what?
A tickle.
A tickle.
In the right direction. That's probably the best quote of the day in his written media session. Russell was saying they're good. Lando Norris, the world champion, was saying they've gone about as far as they can with the current situation. And what he means by that is the current hardware, the engine, the battery, the electrical components, to make a bigger change, to return qualifying more to the flat-out side of it that the drivers would like to have, you need a change basically in the ratio between the internal combustion engine and the electrical power. Ideally, that would mean increasing the power from the engine. That would mean an increase in the fuel flow. That's not possible in season because it's effectively, it would mean a new engine. The engine manufacturers are saying now, whether that's really the case, I don't know. But there is a reliability question because the engines are designed to work optimally at this fuel flow. Change the fuel flow. Obviously, that's going to raise reliability concerns.
The question I have off the back of this is, at what point will Mercedes kick off about this? Because they and Ferrari have probably made the best start, and they probably don't really want the regulations changed that much. They've done well. They've interpreted the regulations well. It's working for them. So will they at some point go, hang on a minute, why are you changing the rules partway through the season, probably again partway through the season again? Well, they're getting it right.
Yeah, so basically everybody's worked in harmony on this particular rule change. Everybody agreed in Formula One that it wasn't right, particularly the way it had changed the essence of what racing driving was over a qualifying lap. The whole sport agreed that was wrong. Although Stefano Domenicali gave a couple of quite controversial interviews in the break to a couple of the specialist outlets, which have raised a few eyebrows. That's the F1 president. They are talking about keeping an open mind about what changes could happen next. I'm not sure how much is possible, as I was saying earlier, with the current hardware. What's going to be interesting now, Jenny, is what is the appetite for further change into next year? Certainly from Max Verstappen's point of view, for example, as he said in his interview with you in Japan, he's questioning his future if they can't change the regulations significantly. But time's running out. The voting structure in Formula One is quite complicated. The governance process has got to be, for changes for next year, you've got to have 4 out of 5 engine manufacturers and the FIA and F1 all in agreement. So will they get to that, the ratio change that I'm talking about, or will they not? They're already talking about the next set of engine regulations in 2030 or 2031, and whether that should be a pure return to naturally aspirated engines with just sustainable fuel, no hybrid at all, no turbo. There's all sorts of ramifications for that. One of which is that Stefano Domenicali, he likes this kind of like gaming aspect of the racing at the moment, which this increased electrical element allows you to have. This sort of yo-yo racing, as George Russell's called it, which has been very appealing for the fans and actually for some of the drivers as well. Think about the battle between Hamilton and Leclerc in China. So if you go back to naturally aspirated engines with no hybrids, you can't do that anymore because you've got no buttons to press or levers to pull, I should say, to allow that to happen. So lots of conversations to have over the next little while. I think from a purist point of view, from a driving point of view, everybody would like to see that ratio change for next year.
Is it also worth noting that I think it's after this weekend, because we had this engine freeze rule where after this weekend the FIA are going to look at the data and see basically whoever's the slowest, cough cough, Aston Martin, Honda, you effectively get a joker and you can work on your engine and develop it, right? So how's that going to play into this overarching look at the engine regulations?
Well, that's kind of separate. So basically it's called ADUO in Formula One jargon. That's additional development,
Formula
upgrade,
One loves the jargon,
additional development and upgrade opportunities. It's all about percentage of difference in internal combustion engine power output. If you're more than 2% away, you get 1 upgrade allowed. If you're more than 4% away, you get 2 upgrade allowances allowed. That's nothing to do with the way the engines work. It's just with how much to do with how much performance they have. It's just the hybrid aspect of it, the electrical aspect of it, that isn't even counted.
Right.
So Honda, without question, will get at least 1 ADUO, probably 2. then the question becomes, does anybody else get it? Because Toto Wolff, the Mercedes engine boss, is saying, oh, no, nobody else needs it. And everybody else is saying, we do.
We definitely do. Just something to keep in the back of your heads. Right, so that's the slight tweaks to the regulations coming into this weekend you need to be aware of. Jenny's also said that we've got a longer FP1 session to make up for the break and all these new tweaks.
Sorry,
so it's going to be 90.
The game away?
No, it's going to be 90
Didn't mean
minutes.
to.
It's a sprint weekend, by the way, so we're straight into it, and that's also a reason. One practice session. Weather update, Jen. Have you got one for me? Sunday looks like it is going to be pouring with rain, and that's actually could have some quite big consequences on the race.
So I was at an event last night speaking to some people who moved from the Netherlands to the UK, and then they moved out here for what was meant to be a year or two. They've been here 16 years, and they were talking to me about weather, because inherently they are still very keen on weather chat. And I said, well, you're not really expecting it to rain that much, are you? What's the rain like here? And they looked at me as if I was crazy and said, oh no, it's going to rain. And it's going to rain hard and heavy, and there's a chance that the race won't get on the way. And I was like, are you joking? And they were like, no, we're deadly serious. And I said, I haven't bought my coat.
So I've got mine, Jen. You can use mine.
And you've got an umbrella, Andrew.
I've got the umbrella that I bought when we were in Japan, Jenny, yes.
Producer Patrick, have you got a spare coat? No, he said, oh dear,
So
I'm
to
in
put that
trouble.
into context, there was an electrical storm here in Miami on the first time Formula One came here in 2022, and I was driving back to the hotel in that storm. It was one of those ones where the lightning, you can see the fork lightning really dramatically sort of sparking down to the ground, lighting up the sky. It was so wet that people were driving, including me, at 20 miles an hour on the freeway. You
That's
couldn't
fast
go
for you.
any faster. It was that wet. And that's a road car with proper ground clearance, not a Formula One car which aquaplanes and so on. So if there's that kind of rain, there's no way that the Grand Prix can take place during that. Also, there are quite strict rules in America from the National Weather Service about events and electrical storms. Basically, they can't take place in the middle of an electrical storm for public safety reasons. Now, Formula One loves a debate about weather and is this going to happen and is that going to happen. Obviously, the Formula One and the FIA have got their eye on the weather forecast. No serious discussions have taken place so far about changing the schedule, for example. They're going to keep an eye on how things develop. Of course, there's always the facility to do that. They don't like to because of TV schedules, so it's really just a watching brief.
80% chance of thunder and lightning on my app on Sunday. And they've already changed the schedule quite heavily this weekend because F2 is suddenly here as well. So it's worth bearing in mind that the schedules are already squeezed. So if they have to squeeze it even more, like an earlier race, then that's going to have knock-on effects.
Well, if I remember correctly, last year, Benny, it rained quite heavily. Was it before the sprint? And Charles Leclerc went off on the way to the sprint and hit the wall. So we've had rain here before, and these are made up of temporary, public and back roads that this track makes. So where does that leave things like the drainage if we do get an absolute deluge?
Well, it's not even public roads; it's a car park that's been paved over, basically, on the land around the stadium here. Yes, it's very flat, this circuit, and drainage is not great. We saw that's why I mentioned aquaplaning there was aquaplaning on the motorway that day I was describing to you. So there was certainly aquaplaning here at the Grand Prix track last year as well. I think if the sort of rain levels come that they're talking about, then nothing will happen until it abates. What we don't know is whether it will, and so we'll just have to wait and see.
Also, if it is raining and they're able to get the race underway, it's going to be fascinating because we've not seen these cars in a full wet scenario.
No, and with the electrical power that they've got now, the high levels, that one of the rule changes is to reduce the amount of electrical power that can be deployed in racing conditions. And there's also some other tweaks to do with the tyre regulations and how warm they can be and so on before they go out on the circuit. It will be a suck it and see day if the rain comes.
Is it weather related why when I accidentally touch people I get a static shock? Anyone else getting that?
Yes.
Why has that happened here?
I think it's the AstroTurf that we're all walking on. It charges us up.
I was filming something with our other producer Joe earlier, and we kept accidentally touching her like 4 or 5 times and kept going
Stop touching people and you'll be fine.
Well, no, it was accidental. Right, anyway, let's leave the weather chat there. We've been away obviously for a few weeks, so we haven't actually had the chance to discuss some of the major news that came out over the last few weeks, and One of them is that, well, the I think it's the second longest driver engineering duo, only behind Lewis Hamilton and Pete Bonnington. That would be Max Verstappen and Jean-Pierre Lambiase, will be splitting up. Not quite yet, but GP, as we all know him, will be leaving Red Bull for McLaren, we believe in 2028 as Chief Racing Officer.
We don't know whether it will be in 2028.
I just knew you were
We
going to say
know that his contract runs out at the end of 27, so he can join in 2028 at the latest. But McLaren were very careful to phrase their press release to say that by 2028.
He's leaving, though.
So he's definitely leaving. There's no question about that. He signed a contract, as you know, Will Courtney, the head of strategy at Red Bull, did a year or so ago, to join as Chief Racing Officer, which is a role that Andrea Stella, the team principal, currently fulfills. It's apparently a big career move for him. And I suspect that there'll be some negotiation going on between McLaren and Red Bull to try and get him out earlier than that, but we'll have to wait and see.
Surely it depends on whether Max is there or not as well. If Max leaves earlier, because he's already said to us that he might leave at the end of this year, you might as well say, GP, you're free to go and build a new relationship.
Lambiase's future had no bearing on his own future in terms of his decision. Whether it works the other way around, I don't know. I suspect that the same would apply. It's an independent thing. They know he's leaving. It just becomes a question of when.
Well, it's been a formidable partnership, and Max was talking about that relationship in the pen with Jen.
Of course, I knew that a bit before. We had a good chat about that. And it would be stupid from my side to try and hold him back when you get an opportunity like that. So I was very happy for him, and we're still working together this year, next year, you know. So and you know, times change in your career, and that was a really good opportunity for him. So I'm happy for him, and as a team, of course, you know, we keep pushing together, we keep looking forward as well, and of course, in the interest of the team for the future, we are trying to find the best people to replace him.
I can't imagine there are many people that wanted the break more than you, so it must have been nice to have that time away with family and do the other racing. How did it feel like to come back into this paddock?
Yeah, good. I mean, it's fine. I've been here a long time now, so even when you have a break like that, when you come back, it's all right. It's warm, so that's probably going to be a very hot weekend in general. But I'm also excited for the team. You know, they've worked really hard to try and find improvements, and hopefully, we can make a little step forward.
I mean, you hear some of the snippets of their team radio sometimes, Jenny, and it sounds like they're a married couple bickering, but it just highlights how brilliant that relationship has been. And it will lead to further questions on Max Verstappen's future, the continued mass exodus, it seems, of Red Bull happening in front of our very eyes. What do Red Bull need to do to convince Max to stay? Obviously, there's the performance element, but they've got to do something.
I don't actually think it's in their control. No. Max is now such a powerhouse. He does what he wants to do. A lot of people have said, why is he racing at Nordschleife? Why is he doing all these other things when they're dangerous, when, you know, crashes can happen and you could break your legs and not come back into this paddock, which is, you know, what he's paid to do in F1. Max is his own animal now. He will do what he wants to a certain extent. I don't think Red Bull can do anything with Max. He'll do his own thing. But what they must do is find a way to stop key people in the team leaving. From what I hear, there are others on the way as well, out the door, and they're significant people. I don't know that yet per se to report on it, but that's what I understand. And if they lose those people as well, rebuilding Red Bull to where it was is going to be a very hard task.
Well, they have had a few senior management changes, Red Bull. They're also they're doing recently they're doing a big push on recruitment in general. They've also continued to build this new wind tunnel, which will be, I'm sure, a big intrigue to Max Verstappen at their factory in Milton Keynes. So that will be a topic that we continually follow. But talk of management changes, Andrew, a little further down the grid, big one down at Audi. Obviously, we lost Jonathan Wheatley. He resigned from Audi as their team principal probably about a month or so ago now. And old friend of Five Live, Alan McNish, has been named as Audi's racing director. He was already involved in the fold. Is this a replacement or a whole different role?
It's a different job title.
Yeah.
Jonathan Wheatley was team principal and Alan McNish is racing director, but it's a de facto like-for-like replacement. Wheatley ran the racing team, Alan McNish is running the racing team. He's got plenty of experience in that. He was the Audi's Formula E team principal for a number of years, and he's got plenty of experience at Audi. He's been there for a very, very long time as an advisor to the board. He won Le Mans 3 times, twice for Audi, once for Porsche, which is a sister brand of Audi. He's been involved in the Audi F1 project from the very beginning. When they announced it in Belgium in 2022, McNish was there.
Was it a bit of a surprise that he wasn't named team principal straight away?
I think it really was, actually, to be honest with you. And obviously, Jonathan Wheatley was a kind of like name recruit. It would have made a lot more sense to appoint Alan McNish in the first place. Maybe there was a reason that we don't know what it was at the moment. It feels like a more... I mean, this has been, I think it's the 4th major management change at Audi since they announced the project in the first place, which is quite a lot considering they've only done 3 Grand Prix. But it kind of maybe feels a bit like they've got to a place now where they might have got to in the first place. They've got a guy in charge, which is Mattia Binotto, and they've got a guy running the racing team, which is Alan McNish. They've faffed around quite a bit, frankly, for want of a better way of putting it, to get to this place. But this feels like a more stable position than they've had for a while, if ever, probably.
I went to see him earlier on, and I just gave the most massive hug because, of course, he's been part of the BBC F1 team in the past. He's a familiar face, and I love working with him. He's such a great analyst of all motorsport, not just F1.
Audi's gain is really commentary's loss, I think. He's such a good commentator.
I love him, and I love what he brings to this sport. And I think, as Andrew said, he's the right person for that role. And whereas I think the organisation of what was Sauber and what is now Audi, he'll get, because he knows that framework, and I think he'll do great things with the team. And whilst Wheatley was able to generate change and passion and a culture shift, I think now Alan can come in and just steady the ship and be very reliable presence. And for us, it's great because he knows what we do, and I'm sure he'll not commentate but come and join us and chat a lot.
Let's get him in the box. He might draw the line at that. Well, look, so that's a change down at Audi. Right, we are nearly done, but it's the moment you've all been waiting for. It's episode 2 of when Harry met Arvid Lindblad, caught up with him back in Australia. Rookie, what did he go and do? Points on debut. He's had a pretty mega start to the year, it has to be said, and I began by asking him if he's used the opportunity of this break to reflect on these first 3 races and life as a fully fledged Formula 1 driver.
Yeah, I think so. I think the first 3 have gone pretty well. I'm overall quite happy. We've had quite a long break now, which was nice, obviously, because the season started very early. There was almost no winter break, but at the same time it does feel a bit weird almost to start the season and have it suddenly stop. But no, it was good, just to also use the time to, like I said, have a bit of a downtime, spend time with friends and family, but also to work with the engineers, analyse the first couple of races, be on the sim to prepare for this week as well.
Yeah, has it actually been quite nice to have a bit of that downtime, to sort of, have you had proper time to switch off?
Yeah, it's there's pros and cons to it. It was nice to have a bit of time to switch off, to sort of decompress, but at the same time I also love driving, so I just can't wait to get back in the car. And
well, you've come to Miami, it is hot. You've never raced here before, right?
Nope, never been here before.
I mean, what's the experience? You've not been on the track yet, but it's a lot to take in. We're literally standing on an NFL pitch. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. I mean, it's going to be my first US Grand Prix, and I've heard that, here in the States they do sports really well, entertainment. The show they put on is amazing. So I'm really looking forward to driving the track, but also just to being a part of just seeing the weekend, seeing the show. Like you said, standing here in the NFL stadium is pretty nuts.
It is cool. A lot to get to grips with, though. Not only you've had the time off, so to try and work on the car. No, there's an upgrade package here, but also we've had some regulation changes, a few tweaks. What have you made of them? And what after the first 3 races, how did you feel about where Formula 1 was at, and how are you feeling now going forward with these tweaks made to hopefully give you bit more flat out in qualifying, for instance?
Yeah, I mean the upgrades that you touched on initially. I mean, yeah, we've got some good stuff, coming this week. We'll see what it's like in the end. Everyone's going to bring an upgrade, so it's going to be about relatively how big they are. But it's exciting in the end. It could be quite a big jumble up of the field. And then on the regs, yeah, we tried it in the sim, but it's hard to really know until we get out on track. So we'll see tomorrow.
Now, I know you're not a guy that likes to set yourself too many sort of specific goals, but next time I catch up with you, I think we'll be at a European track, somewhere maybe Monaco. What would you like to have achieved in the next few races once we get back underway? Can I pin you down to one?
I don't know. I think, in the end, I'm enjoying driving these cars at the moment. I've been having a lot of fun in qualifying. I've had 2 Q3s in the first 3 races. I don't know. In the end, I want to have Q3s. I want to get in the points, but at the same time, that's also an outcome goal. Yeah. I'm very focused on myself and my performance because, and the process and doing my bits right, because then it will lead to that. So it'd be nice to have a couple more Q3s if that's possible. Maybe some points. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
I'll throw that back to you in Monaco, and we'll see where we're at.
Right. Well, Monaco's 2 races. So.
Oh, that's true. Okay, we'll delay it a bit. That's unfair.
Maybe it's a Rebel Ring.
Yeah,
they give it 3 or 4.
Maybe Silverstone.
Yeah, okay.
Home race. Yeah, that'll be a nice one. Yeah. Lastly, Arvid, from our first chat, I believe I asked you if you had any nicknames, and you said you didn't, or you were a bit coy on it. Now, I've done a bit of brainstorming.
Oh dear. You've done brainstorming. Okay.
Well, I've come up with some, and I want to see how you feel about them. Arv.
Crikey.
RV.
RV.
The Arvinator. Arvatron. Lindblads.
What?
Lindblads.
Lindlads.
Lindblads.
So I think like you're saying my surname now.
No, it's got like an S on the end.
Lindblads.
Lindblads, yeah. Or Lindbladders. Any of those tickle your fancy? Or?
I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the effort.
Thank you.
But I think you need to go back to the drawing board.
All right, fine.
You kind of set the tone with Arv.
Well, look, we got better and better, didn't we? No,
yeah.
Fine. All right, then, Silverstone, I will also have some fresh set of nicknames for you. And by the end of this year, we will have a proper nickname for Arvid Lindblad. Deal?
Yeah.
But you didn't say deal.
Thank you.
Cheers, Arvid.
Thank you very much.
Arvid there, really avoiding the subject of me picking a nickname for him, and also clearly didn't agree to our meet-up in Monaco, which I'm pretty sure was scheduled, so it might be Silverstone, but he didn't like Arvinator, Arvatron, Lindbladders. No, guys? We were trying to come up with a nickname for Arvid, so... No.
I think his name is so cool, he doesn't need a nickname.
Everyone can have a nickname.
Hazza. No.
That's people call me that.
I know.
We all call Andrew Benny.
Yeah, but his name isn't cool as Andrew. Arvid, it's so cool. And I like the yellow that they're wearing this weekend, the Miami yellow. It pops. I love it.
Right, well, anyway, always good to chat with Arvid, and he's in really good spirits.
Have you seen the Mercedes pink race suit, Jenny?
Look, people have come up with some snazzy kit this weekend. I like the way that Carlos Sainz down at Williams said, I wouldn't probably wear this any other time, but, I'm loving it because it's Miami.
But I'm contractually obliged.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, read the small print.
Yeah, there's a lot of special Miami merchandise, liveries as well, up and down the field to celebrate, well, the first race in America for the year. Okay, what are we looking out for this weekend? What are you expecting to happen? Predictions? If we get a race underway on Sunday, regardless of the weather, what are we saying for pole and the win?
At this event last night, someone asked me, could Perez win for Cadillac?
No.
And I said, absolutely no chance whatsoever, unless there's an almighty deluge and something crazy happens. And then I had the conversation about the weather. So Cadillac, Perez, done. Surely, no?
If you want to stick with that, then that's on your head, be it.
No, I'm not going to stick with that, but I do think that Norris can do something special here. We've seen it in the past with the upgrades. I'm going to go for maybe another Kimi Antonelli pole for the sprint race.
Oh, okay.
And the race, but I think it'll be Norris that wins the race.
On Sunday. Okay.
Oh, Kimi's just walked past me.
Speak of the devil, Kimi Antonelli in that rather dashing purple race suit and pink hat as well.
Did you
I'm
carry
liking
that
the pink
off?
hats. I think do you think I could carry that off?
Yeah, could
I
you?
think purple's actually a bit of my colour, so I think I'd be all right.
Good.
Yeah. Andrew, give me a pole position and a victory on Sunday.
Well, Antonelli was very strong here last year.
Don't steal this from me.
So I think Jenny might have a point there. I think Antonelli might get pole. But I think this is a weekend that Russell's going to bounce back.
Okay, so you're going from pole for Kimi and a race win for Russell.
Yeah.
I'm going to do pole for Kimi, race win for Kimi as well, because of last year and how he came alive last year. We thought this was welcome to the party, Kimi Antonelli. Didn't quite happen, but a year on, and he really is showing that full potential. All right, guys, I think we're just about done. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, Jenny. We have kicked off the weekend nicely, and we'll be bringing you the Chequered Flag podcast throughout the weekend as well, reacting to the sprint, Grand Prix qualifying and the race, which is available both as a podcast and on iPlayer and YouTube. You can listen to the Miami Grand Prix from 8 p.m. on Sunday, lights out at 9 p.m. on 5 Live, and on the go with the BBC Sounds app. Right, I think we're off somewhere for dinner. Producer Paddy's made a reservation, so we better get out of here. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.